Hey everyone, Josh here. So if you've been following the channel for a little while, you know I bought this car last summer and I did summer of CJAA repairs. I bought this car fairly cheap, it wasn't running, and it had, I wouldn't say neglected life, but it was definitely had some deferred maintenance. So did all summer, I did videos on getting this thing caught up so it'd be 100% for my wife. But there's two items I knew I should have done, but I didn't. So the first major one that we're doing today, obviously you clicked on the title, it's going to be the dual mass flywheel. So as soon as I had this car running, you'd hear the clattering, and yeah, I knew it needed a dual mass flywheel, but I didn't want to take everything all back apart, so I've been putting it off. It's got about 45,000 kilometers more on it, and I want to get this done before it pokes a hole in the transmission. So when the dual mass flywheel goes, it's pretty obvious. You can hear the sound at idle. It also kind of stuttering when it gets under load pretty good. But yeah, I'll clip in a quick video on what it sounds like, and then I'll go over parts and tools needed for this job. Okay, so you're gonna hear the touch when I go to shut it off, and then when I start it up, like it's in high idle right now because the coolant's cold. But when it's at regular low idle, you'll hear it kind of clanging away, and then as it slowly revs up, it kind of goes away. So that's what I mean when at idle you hear it, and then rev it up a little bit and it goes away. It's pretty obvious. So we'll hear a little clang here on shutdown. And we'll start her up. So let's go over parts. So obviously, I need a dual mass flywheel, so DMF 126. This is all my V10 stuff, but I do have flywheel bolts and mount bolts. So that should be, oh, it tells you right there. Oh, it's subframe bolts. Yeah, just a pile of stuff. So that's it for that box. And then dual mass flywheel itself. And then it should also come with the little pilot bearing. Which if it doesn't, you gotta make sure you order that. So nice and easy. So if you order this from somewhere that knows Volkswagens or TDIs like Cascade German or ID Parts, they should have a drop down for all the hardware consumables that you need. And obviously the pilot bearing, all that good stuff. So we should be set for parts, hopefully. Okay, then as far as tools, I'm doing this in my garage without a lift like a lot of people will be doing. So there's a few parts you need, or a few tools you need outside of the regular hand tools like the metric hex bolts, triple squares, Torx, all that kind of stuff. A few things you're going to need is obviously jack stands to get it up nice and high. I bought a engine strut bar, I don't know whatever they call it, but the bars you put on the frame rail like this, and then it's got a little hook to hold the engine up. And then the plan is I've got my engine hoist here, so I'm going to hook the engine hoist to the transmission and go down with it. The other thing you're going to need is a way to get the pilot bearing out. So I just bought a cheap pilot bearing removal set. What I've done before too is this will be sitting in your crank, and if you get a either fill full of really thick grease and a punch that fits in tight, you can hydrolock it and it'll push this out. Bread from your lunch will work as well, but then you're out your bread. So I'm gonna give that a try with the pilot removal tool, and yeah, may as well get started. Okay, so you need to obviously get to the transmission, so I'm not going to film this part, but you got to get your air box, your battery, and your battery support out of there. And then the transmission should be sitting there nice and easy, so just like that, things are looking easier. To be honest, this is my first time dropping a DSG, so I'm not 100% sure on which route I want to go. Two things I do know is I really don't want to drop the subframe, and it needs to be running for tomorrow morning for my wife. So, and it's Sunday, so I can't get parts if things go bad. But the plan now, I'm going to go underneath and start on doing stuff underneath. But up top here, I think I'm going to get this boost pipe out of here. The DSG cooler, you can either unbolt it and flop it over or take these lines off. There's O-rings underneath here, and with all the dirt and junk, I think I'm just going to take these lines off and clamp them. Few cables and stuff like that to the starter. You got the shifter linkage back here. But yeah, I'm going to go underneath. My plan is I'm going to pull the driver's side CV axle right out of there. And the passenger one, I'm going to unbolt it, but just leave it in there because the transmission, I'm hoping I can go over and then down. So if I have this dry shaft out, I should have enough wiggle room to come over and down without dropping the subframe, I'm hoping. But I guess we will see shortly. Okay, so this side's passenger side, I'm just going to let it hang. The other one is out of there already. Quick and easy way of doing that is unbolt it here, unbolt the big nut at the end there, and then just pull the 3 bolts for the ball joint, and then you can pull basically the knuckle out far enough and it walks out really easy. Yeah, quick and easy. It's just you have to have a 24 mil 12 point to get the nut off the other end, or actually it's a bolt, but anyways. So shafts are done. So now as far as mounts, so I'm going to get this dog bone out of here, and then we just got like 1 and then 2, 3, maybe 4, and then probably the rest I'll get from above. And then yeah, we'll get this boost pipe out of here as well, and yeah, it'll be looking pretty good for underneath here at least. I gotta say, this charge pipe is my least favorite thing to get out of here. You got all the electronic harnesses run across it, coolant hoses, and these clamps back there right at the turbo kind of suck. So we got a clamp there, we got a bolt goes there, a bolt that goes in the bottom of the mount right here, and then if you're in Canada, you've got a coolant heater that bolts to it as well. So it's just a lot of stuff in here, and it's really tight to squeeze out. So you kind of got to turn it, twist it, pull it down, and make sure you don't break the fans or anything like that. So, but I think once that's out of there, it's going to make it a lot easier up top. Okay, and with the charge area out, it's a lot easier to see. We've got a bolt here yet. So there was one right here that went transmission to oil pan. The next one up is transmission to block. And then we've got a starter bolt that I've got my wrench on right now. So pop these off, and then this electrical bracket, I believe that's a 10 mil in behind there, and we can get that off the pan. And then I think that should be pretty well it for underneath here. The rest of the stuff will catch up top. Okay, so there was one more 10 mil bolt in that harness that went to the transmission pan. So then as far as electrical up here, we're gonna get this ground strap off and just hold it off to the side. Starter signal, the DSG connector itself should just twist off, and then positive cable to the starter. It's got this starter guard on it. We'll pop all that off, and then get the harness away, and probably get ready to get this strapped up, get the starter off, and then figure out how we're going to hold this with the engine hoist. Okay, so we got the starter out. So the cables do not look nice. So I'm going to add that to my list of stuff I should probably do, and then I won't, and then it's going to be minus 25 and it won't start. And I'll be changing it out in the yard. In behind the starter here, we have a 14 millimeter triple square bolt that goes into the bell housing. So don't forget that one. We just got these 2 across the top holding it. And then the shifter cable itself, I'm just going to pop them off. I took these clips off cameras. I didn't want to lose them. Just the little guy that holds the lever onto the ball end. And then this bigger one was really tight, but it might have just been partially seized. So I should be able to push that through, and then I'll tuck this up with the heater hoses somewhere. New tool day. So we got this thing all kind of set up. I don't know how it's going to work. It's a little sketchy, but kind of sits a lot higher than I would have thought, but it's on there. Somewhat sturdy. So my plan is we're going to get the jack underneath, go off the oil pan, kind of just hold the engine. We're going to undo these 3 for the mount, and then these 4 for the mount to transmission. And then I'm going to get my engine hoist in here with a nice long cable, and probably put an eyelet here and an eyelet back there. I think that would kind of be centered. Yeah, I'm just a little concerned of it rocking and falling off of here, so I might keep the jack on the oil pan just to make sure it doesn't roll away on me. Okay, so we got things moderately sketchy here. We got some decent lifting hooks. So bolted into the back bolt there, and then the bottom for the starter. I feel like there's still a lot of weight back at the diff, but we'll see what happens. But then the lifting chain is MIA, so we're using a ratchet strap. I don't know. Yeah, it's a little sketchy, but I'm gonna give it a shot. So we're gonna unbolt the top two. That's the two I think that are left. And then we'll see what happens. May as well record this live, that way you can all laugh at my misfortune when it all falls to the ground. You obviously don't want to get too aggressive. I think it needs a little more up. So the downside of this is you obviously don't want to be underneath it. So that makes it less fun. At least try and get it started here. There we go. So yeah, so reassembly, it kind of popped like that. So reassembly, I might put a ratchet strap to the shifter cable at the very back, or like shifter bracket, and then ratchet strap it up just to kind of give it that extra rotate, because I'm just doing this myself. Okay, so the axle cup is rubbing basically the back ear of the block. So if we go reverse neutral, should be able to turn the cups, and it should probably clear the block there. Yeah, I just think this back corner just needs to get lifted up a little bit. It's easier said than done. Oh, might have got it. So if the CV shaft off the other side, it comes down, but it's really tight right here. So prying that ahead pulls the whole engine up and forward into the fans, and it's not a great time. So in the future, I will probably pull the subframe, but the issue is right now I've got my jack stand sitting on the subframe, so can't really pull that right now. Okay, so now we're gonna get this flywheel out of here. So that'd be where the clanging and banging comes from. So it is what it is. So we'll get those 6 bolts out, get that flywheel out of there, and then we will try and get this center bushing out. With a little bit of prying, the flywheel come off. I was thinking about it this morning. I should have gotten a rear main seal to install, but obviously it's Sunday and I can't get that. So she's going back together, but it's definitely damp down around the bottom. The issue is it's got the tone wheel in there for the crank sensor, so it requires a special tool to make sure it's set, obviously top dead center where it needs to be. So besides just buying the seal, you're going to need to either buy or rent the tool, so it's a bit more of a pain than just changing it out. The other thing is, if you watched my video a couple weeks ago on a CJAA no start, you'll see we have the crank sensor there. And then on that car, I had some really bad wiring right around that pressure sensor, and you can see this one is rubbing as well. The wire loom's all falling off. So I'm going to get this one rerouted and wrapped up and hopefully prevent that in the future while it's somewhat easy to get at. Okay, so as far as getting this pilot bearing out, one side's got the seal, one side doesn't, so the seal will be facing out like that. These pilot bearing removal tools, it's just basically you slip this side in and then you screw this in and it's going to expand up and then basically grip tight, and then you put a slide hammer on the end of here. So it looks like it's pretty simple as long as it works. I should maybe have gone up the next size up. Okay, we'll go next size up then. So the great thing about cheap tools is they're cheaply made. You can see how it's not cut, so it's expanding odd, whereas the next size up is centered. But I really don't think that's gonna fit. No. Seems like it's grabbing better now. Well, it took a little bit, but it finally popped out. So basically I kept going until it kind of, these have a bit of a raised edge at the very end, so I went until I thought it was just about to catch the outside lip, kind of where the seal sits, and then just expanded it more, and away she popped. So we got the new one drove in, and then we'll get the flywheel on. Okay, it's on there, bolts are snug, so now we're going to do the torque specs. So if you buy parts from ID Parts, they have these cool posters, which I need to get another one because I spilled coffee on this one. But CBEA and CJAA torque specs, and then down here we've got all of our torque specs. So 44 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees for the flywheel bolt, or bolts. So I'll torque that 44 foot-pounds, and then I kind of cheat. I'll put a mark on it and then use the impact to get the 90. It's kind of a pain to try and hold the engine there. The other thing, so transmission to block bolts, the M10, so the smaller ones are 40 foot-pounds, the bigger ones are 59, and the starter bolts are 59. So that should cover off our torque specs. And then up top we've got these ones up here. So again, they're all torque to yield, so make sure you're changing the bolts out. So hopefully you weren't following along while you're doing this yourself, because I forgot to say, remember to make sure you put that steel plate back on, that divider plate, if you took it off. I bent it a little bit, dropping that trans out with the coupler, or with the output drive shaft yoke on it still, so I took it off, straightened it out, put it back on, but it won't fit on once you have the flywheel, so make sure that's on first. Then the other thing I would note is if you're going to use the impact to get your torque turn, make sure you are seating the impact down all the way, because it can kind of bounce around, because these are pretty shallow heads. I don't know why it won't. There. There's not much there for the impact to grab, so when you're trying to get your 90 degrees, it's pretty tight, and it will bounce around, and then you can get that messed up, so just keep that in mind. So assembly's going 10 times better than disassembly did. I am all cockeyed, but at least it's up there. The diff is cleared down there fine. I just kind of went up till stuff started hitting and kind of pried and pulled, and it seemed like the transmission was kind of sitting more like this.
came up, and then as soon as I put this ratchet strap onto the back and put a little bit of pressure, everything just kind of twisted and came up where it needs to be. So I'm going to take this one off now that the diff is above the subframe, and hopefully kind of get it rocked to where it needs to be, because I am sitting too far this way, and also the outside's bent down too far. So not out of the woods yet, but getting it up above the diff, above the subframe, was my main issue. Okay, so I was going to film this part of getting the transmission lined up again and getting the splines lined up with the splines here. But I put a dowel, or not a dowel pin, but the old bolt in the oil pan underneath here, just to kind of keep it rotated where it needed to be. And then when I went to basically lift the top and kind of get it lined up, it all fell in and it's sitting seated now. So there's not really much I can film here. But if you aren't as lucky as me, you can put a bolt in the bottom and kind of get it somewhat lined up with a bolt at the top. You're gonna want to make sure you've got the same like gap top and bottom, and then just basically slide it in. And if for some reason if the splines aren't quite lined up, you can go in through your starter hole here with this little screwdriver and just turn the, just kind of bump it over while trying to push it in. So I've got to say, I've never been this lucky before, but yeah, it just fell right in. So assembly went a lot better than disassembly. So for future reference, if you're going to do it with the subframe still installed, to be honest, I might try it again this way, but I would probably pull the rad fans and then make sure your engine's on the lifting chains that are supplied with these. That way you've got a little bit of wiggle front and back. I think my issue on disassembly was I had the engine sitting down too far, and then everything was just kind of getting bound up. As soon as I got that CV shaft, the output shaft off, and kind of got everything walked around the subframe, it didn't go too bad. So I think if we had a little bit more room on the front side, disassembly would have went a lot better, and reassembly was just awesome. So you're gonna get some bolts in now. Obviously I showed the torque spec earlier, so there's not much on that. But yeah, we're just gonna keep going back together now. So we're all back together. So honestly, going back together is probably easier than coming apart. You kind of know where everything goes, and yeah, actually worked really good. So flywheel's done. We got the tensioner done. I did that in a different video, as well as the alternator pulley. So we're gonna see if this starts, and I guess goes forward and back, and then I'll test drive it tomorrow, because that's probably a good idea. Let's see what happens. Yeah, all the gears work. So we're gonna have some lights until you go drive it around, because we had the battery out, but other than that, should be good. So we'll see you in the morning.